Hi, I'm Mike from Nascent Startups, here to talk about simplifying entrepreneurship. A few months ago, back in October, Paul Orlando welcomed me to USC, University of Southern California, to talk about this Nascent Startups methodology. And I had a great time working with Paul and his team of founders. You can see the photo of us here. I guess it went so well that Paul asked me to provide some extra videos, and here you go. I hope this is helpful to the team at USC and everybody who's subscribing to the Nascent Startups newsletter. To be specific, Paul actually asked me to work on a presentation called The Art and Science of Quantifying Pain to help founders understand what they should do. But before I tell founders what I think that they should do, the first thing I want to do is make their lives a little bit easier. So the purpose of this talk, Simplifying Entrepreneurship, is to clean the plate for a lot of founders, make their lives a lot easier so they can focus on useful work. Before we dig into entrepreneurship, I just want to tell a quick story, a brief history of flight. Many people for millennium have been interested in flying. They've seen the birds flying and they've thought, oh, I wish I could fly like a bird. One example of a person like that was Otto Lilienthal. And they would build these proto-apparatus machine things that kind of mimic wings, and they would then take this leap and they'd hope that they'd fly, and then unfortunately you die trying. And one of the things that blows my mind about the Wright brothers was that they were able to quantify lift. They were able to know that they were going to fly, and that's part of why they survived. The thing that hits me about this story is I feel like it's very similar to entrepreneurship today. For most founders, when it comes to starting a startup, it's still a blind leap of faith. And the goal with nascent startups is to get founders from taking that Lilienthal leap to having that Wright brothers knowledge. For our goal, everything we're going to be talking about centers on this one question. I got an idea for a business. Now what? There are lots of conventional answers out there. Just to level set, I went into Google and I typed that in, and Google has like 5 different action items that you have to do. You got to validate your idea and make a business plan and do legal and administrative and get funding and launch and marketing. Tons of stuff for a founder to do. If you want to use some more modern tools, you could use ChatGPT. It has 9 things for you to do. Claude AI has a bunch. Perplexity. Everyone's got these like really long, complicated lists. So it's no wonder that today founders feel really confused when they say, I got an idea for a business, now what? So our goal here today, before even getting into what you should do, is to talk about what you should not do. We want to simplify so that we can create some space for some useful work. One of the core ideas of nascent startups is that nascent stage startups without customers face different challenges than early stage startups with customers. I'm going to keep hitting this over and over and over. If your startup has customers or your startup has no customers, you face different challenges. And none of those playbooks we just looked at with the conventional answers starts with that distinction. So already there's a huge problem. Part of the issue is that historically, founders have been distracted by methodologies for early stage startups. It was in the founder's interest to be confused in many ways. And so I'm here to say that founders can now embrace the nascent stage. Along with me on this journey is my partner in nascent startups, a guy named Adam. We've founded a bunch of startups. We've mentored a bunch of founding teams. We've been working at this for a really long time. We define a nascent startup as the kernel of a business idea, no customers, no product, and no funding. And what this means is that as a founder with a nascent stage startup, you're basically just have a project that may or may not become a business. And at the nascent stage, your goal as a founder is to try to decide as quickly and cheaply as possible with limited resources whether or not that you want to go forward and turn the project into a business. The nascent stage is all about coming to that decision. We expect that you don't have, millions of dollars in the bank, that time actually matters to you. You're not connected to like the greatest, investors in the world. You're just a normal run-of-the-mill founder, like 99% of all the founders out there. And so the nascent startups methodology is for folks trying to make that decision. And we are in particular focused on customer discovery. So what is not customer discovery? I would argue that you have conventional businesses and you have breakthrough startups. A conventional business is something like a barbershop or a pizza restaurant or a laundry cleaning service. And that's one type of conventional business. And on the other side, you've got breakthrough startups where you have some kind of new technology breakthrough, for instance, where it's a new solution to a valuable, obvious problem. So a canonical example there would be Ozempic. Like everybody understands that there's all these people in the world that want to lose weight, and if only there were a drug that would let people lose weight, Ozempic, ta-da. So that's technology breakthroughs. On the other side, you've got customer breakthroughs, where you have a new solution to a valuable problem, but that problem is a hidden problem. So the canonical example there would be Airbnb. Nobody knew that all these people with extra couches and extra beds in their house would be hosting all these strangers from around the world. That was, a huge customer breakthrough. So in this framework of conventional business versus customer breakthrough, when I talk to folks, they typically say, oh, startups, breakthrough startups, it's all about investment. I don't think it's about investment. I think the core distinction between a conventional business and a breakthrough startup is knowledge. Specifically, with a conventional business, the majority of knowledge already exists. Whereas for a breakthrough startup, self-taught learning is what really makes them unique and so challenging. So if you want to invent Ozempic or some other technology like a teleportation device, like obviously people want this thing. It's just super expensive, like millions and millions and millions of dollars to try to create that technology breakthrough. By contrast, on the customer breakthrough side, what's interesting is that new knowledge is affordable. It isn't inherently expensive. And right now, I've got some great information. Good news for founders of customer breakthrough startups. You have more power than you realize. It can feel very frustrating. It can feel overwhelming. You're like, oh God, I have so much to do as a founder. Good news, you have more power than you realize. Do not worry. And so today we're going to be talking about navigating this nascent stage, answering this question of got an idea for a business, now what? So I just want to call out how crazy this is to me that this question is still an open question. How is this still a challenge? I would argue that, in America and Silicon Valley, startups have been a really big deal for at least 20 years. And so many people have asked this question, and there's still not a good answer. Definitely not when you ask Google and ChatGPT and these other things. Not to mention all the books out there. It's kind of amazing to me that this is still a challenge. And our goal with Nascent Methodology is to give you a compelling answer to that question. And so you as a founder, I hope you're asking yourself, that's a big promise. Like, what's going on? Why has this been a challenge? And Mike, if you're telling me you think you got a good answer, then what's changed? Why couldn't this have been answered 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but now in 2025, we think we can answer it? We're going to be digging in, and I'll give you a very specific answer by the end of the presentation. So the issue here is that businesses are a really complex system, especially successful businesses. When you as a founder want to create, $1 billion business, and you look to the successful businesses in this world, it's really complex, and it's really difficult as a founder to avoid distractions and figure out what to prioritize. Like, what's the one button that you got to hit to get this thing working? And so because of all these distractions and challenges with prioritization, founders tend to do this thing that I call wing flapping, this confusion of how does the business really work? It leads to this phenomenon called wing flapping. So what is wing flapping? Wing flapping is when a person wants to fly like a bird, so they flail their arms in the vain hope that they might fly as well. Well, we all know that obviously that's not going to work. What I see more broadly is this tendency among humans where we trick ourselves because we don't understand the underlying principles of the challenge that we're trying to navigate. And in terms of startups and entrepreneurship, wing flapping is when a founder of a nascent stage startup that has no customers mimics the qualities of a high revenue later stage business in the hopes that that mimicking will actually lead to something productive. It doesn't. When we look at this conventional answer to the question, I got an idea for business, now what? Most of what Google is telling you to do, validate your idea, develop a business plan, do marketing, legally incorporate, it's all wing flapping. It is mimicking what successful businesses have done. But that's for businesses with customers. At the nascent stage, you have no customers. All of that's a distraction. All of that's wing flapping. Another source of confusion, in addition to wing flapping, is fake it till you make it. So many founders try to fake it till you make it. To be clear, I've done this myself. I am not calling anyone out. I'm the first person to raise my hand to say I have played the game of fake it till you make it. If you've heard fake it till you make it recently as a founder, you're not crazy. Like, here are some media clippings from articles that I took from Forbes and MarketWatch. If you've heard of startup pitch competitions and demo days, I would argue that those are forms of faking it. I was talking with this investor, a guy named Jesse from Icebreaker, and we were talking about this phenomenon of founders faking it. And he goes, "Oh yeah, I totally know what you mean. I was just talking with a founder who's like, oh, you should invest in my company. I've got a customer." And Jesse does seed stage investment, the earliest investments. Sounds like a good fit. So Jesse starts digging into, okay, who exactly is your customer? And after some back and forth, it turns out the first customer was the founder themselves. Hey, founders, if you're saying that you're your own customer, you have no customers. You're lying to yourself. It's fake it till you make it. It is not helpful. And so I'm here with the very good news to say, fake it till you make it is dead. The death of fake it till you make it is a huge opportunities for founders. I hope we're all like dancing and doing a little party. This is such a huge opportunity for founders. So let's dig into like, where did this come from? What's changed? Why can we start to celebrate now? So as a founder, if you want to create a startup, you need, in my book, at least 5 things. You need a problem to solve. You need customers that have the problem. You need a product that solves the problem. You need a team to build the business, and you need investment to pay for all this. This is the recipe for a business in the bare minimum. And in this recipe, historically, the thing that it was most important was investment. That was the thing that founders had to focus on. You could have the problem, the customers, the product, the team, you could have that all lined up. But historically, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, if you couldn't secure investment, you were out of luck. You couldn't pay the entry cost, as it were, to get into the startup game. So what that meant was founders would have to fake it. They had to pretend that they had the problem worked out and the customers and the product and the greatest team ever to solve this problem. They had to fake all of this so that they could secure funding from investors and overcome the barrier to entry. And the thing with investment is when you're faking it for the audience of investors. Faking it means you're lying to yourself so that you can lie to investors so that you can get the funding you need to create your startup. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, I understand why people did this. And today, founders still do this. And I'm here to say we can end this charade and it's going to benefit all of us. And so when you dig into the math, what you see is 20 years ago, founders needed $100,000 of angel investment for the core technology for their startup, to buy the physical server racks with the servers and to get an engineer to write the software, all of that just to get started. And over the last 20 years, what's changed is the cost of that core technology has gotten 1,000 times cheaper. So what cost $100,000 of technology 20 years ago, today it costs less than $100. And all founders out there, you got to have at least $100 in your pocket. And so what that means is investment has gone from the most important thing to your biggest distraction, at least at the nascent stage. And so I'm talking about this change. So let's dig into when exactly do we think this change occurred? When did entrepreneurship change? I would say that much of the way we think about startup strategy began in 2005 with Steve Blank's book, The 4 Steps to the Epiphany. Probably the most important lesson from Steve's book is get out of the building to understand customers. And that's still something that's really important in nascent. So we'll put a pin in that and come back to it later. But that year, 2005, things were super different. Back then, the core technology cost that $100,000. There really were actual servers. And now today, the cost is less than $100. And so when did all this change? The date that I like to think of as the inflection point was April 23rd, 2015. What happened on April 23rd, 2015? That was the day that Amazon first released standalone revenue results for AWS, for Amazon Web Services. Of course, up until then, people knew that there was cloud computing and folks were using it. Like, it wasn't like it came out of the blue in April 2015. But what did come out of the blue, when you go back and you look at the headlines, such as this headline from Fortune magazine, so many people were blown away by just how much money Amazon was making with AWS. And the reason that Amazon was making so much money was because they made compute so incredibly affordable. When I think about this from like a historical context, I actually think it's kind of funny. I think about like Karl Marx and his whole seize the means of production, Das Kapital. why did Karl Marx say seize the means of production? Well, he's like, oh, it's not fair that we need $1 million factory and then that you have these proletariat workers getting paid such low wages. And if I could like take Karl Marx and stick him in a time machine and bring him to the future, I would bet that Karl Marx would give an award to Jeff Bezos, because ever since April 2015, you don't need to seize the means of production. The means of production are clearly affordable. So I love the idea of Karl Marx giving an award to the richest guy in the world. But it's true, like because of Bezos and AWS leading the way, and Microsoft Azure and Google Cloud Services following, and all these microservices and no-code, low-code tools, and just the cost of technology has dropped dramatically. And what that means for founders is if you and your co-founder before 2015 might have debated whether or not to take angel investment, whether or not to like raise that $100,000 round, ever since 2015, it's clear that investment's a distraction. And I am begging for founders to please embrace this change. You don't need $100,000 at the nascent stage. When I was talking with another friend about this shift, he remarked, oh yeah, back in 2007, we spent months working on our startup just writing software to securely store credit card data. And today, that's a Stripe integration that just takes a couple days. Again, there's just this huge shift in the market. And what this means is, for founders, we can dramatically simplify entrepreneurship, and we can stop lying to get investment. And this is a huge unlock. So I want to dive deep into all the different opportunities that result from this unlock. So we're going to talk about stopping lying, don't feel pressure to create a business, don't pretend you have customers, and don't ignore the odds of success. Let's start with just seeking the truth and stopping lying. Like I said, I think the most important quality for a customer breakthrough startup is self-taught learning. And self-taught learning essentially is a search for truth. So there's this huge tension within a founder when they feel that they have to lie and they also have to search for truth. You can't hold both of those together. So when we stop lying, we can do a better job of searching for truth. What that means in practice is your idea is still evolving, and we can embrace that. You don't have to have a specific idea. We can say it's the kernel of a business idea. That's good enough at the nascent stage. Probably the most important thing is to embrace having no customers. You just have the kernel of an idea, you got no customers, no product, no funding, and having no customers is totally cool. Welcome. We're very happy to have you here in the world of no customers. Another thing I want to talk about is how you can now enjoy the searching and learning process, at least at the nascent stage. When you take this conventional approach that I got an idea for a business, I got to jump in and create the business. Creating a business with no data is really stressful. I've done it. It sucks. Pitching investors, try to tell them stories so that they'll believe that you have this great idea that they should give money to. That's also super stressful. And if they actually give you the money, working to 10x their investment is incredibly stressful. So we can just take a big break and just stop stressing. Investors aren't important right now. At the nascent stage, investors aren't important right now. And you as a founder can just enjoy the exploration. After the nascent stage, you can decide on investment. But right now, let's just, quote unquote, eat the elephant. How do you eat the elephant? One bite at a time. And we're not going to worry about investors. So the way I would encourage folks to think about their startup at the nascent stage is a startup is a journey. And your goal at the nascent stage is to answer the question, is this journey the right opportunity for you right now? That's it. You just want to come to that decision and try to figure it out quickly and cheaply. That's the goal. And we have ways to do it, but most of what you're told to do today, legally incorporate and come up with a marketing plan, that is not going to answer this question. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this idea of letting go of pretending that we have customers and embracing the lack of customers. The team at Nascent Startups, me and Adam and our supporters, we are crazy about startups with no customers. Please, write me on Twitter and LinkedIn and be like, I got no customers and it's great. I'd love to hear from you. It might sound a little crazy to hear us talk about startups with no customers. Customers are the essence of business. You got an idea for a business. So you might feel like you're out of place, but just know that you're in good company, because remember that every business begins with no customers. Apple, Google, all of these great companies that we look up to, they all began with no customers. So The key distinction, I could just keep saying it until I'm blue in the face. Startups with customers face different challenges than startups without customers. And so when you look at the conventional answer for I got an idea for a business, now what? Most of those startup strategies are for startups with customers. That means that most of those strategies are distractions at the nascent stage. I want to be really, really specific. So, everybody I know talks about product market fit. This comes from an article written by Mark Andreessen back in 2007, where he defined the product market fit as the market pulls the product out of the startup, essentially through word of mouth. Word of mouth comes from customers. Word of mouth means that you have a customer that loves your product so much that they tell their friends about it, they tell the press about it. It's an amazing thing, I'm sure. But at the nascent stage, you have no customers, which means you have no advocates. Like, product market fit is logically impossible. It's an unachievable distraction. And the more you talk about it at the nascent stage, the more you're confusing yourself and the harder you're making your life. Another term I hear all the time is minimum viable product. Eric Ries in 2011 defined it in his book, The Lean Startup. The minimum viable product allows a team to collect validated learning about customers as part of the build, measure, learn feedback loop. That's all true. That's great. But let's be really clear. Measurement with an MVP is a fantastic strategy for a startup that has customers. For startups that are at the nascent stage and have no customers, there's nothing to measure. You can build all you want and you're super distracted and you have nobody that can actually use your product. An MVP at the nascent stage is a logically impossible distraction. Just let it go. We have other things we can work on that are much more useful than an MVP. Another winner for me is Y Combinator, make something people want. To me, this is really silly. It's like a founder saying to them, okay, how do you fly? And their answer is get in the air and stay there. The founder responds, yeah, but how? Make something people want is wing flapping. We all know that we want to do it. That's not what's hard. The question is, how do you know that you're making something people want? That's the question. And so the last of these opportunities I want to highlight is the common approach to startups, which is ignoring the odds of success and replacing that with the idea of characterizing the opportunity. A startup is an open-ended journey. I've done it more than 10 times. For instance, the founders that I spoke to when I was at USC last October, when I said, how many of you guys want to create a unicorn startup? All the hands went up. It was awesome. When I think of a unicorn startup, it's like the mountaintop off in the distance. Like, we know where we want to go. We want to get there eventually. We just don't know how. And so the better question right now is to say, look, I know where I want to go, but at the nascent stage, I recognize that it's easy to sink lots of time and money into the startup. I could put thousands of dollars, months of my time. And the goal right now is to just characterize the opportunity. The antithesis of this, which I would say the way most founders work, it really reminds me of the movie Dumb and Dumber. Jim Carrey says, what's the chances of a guy like me getting with a girl like you? And not good, like 1 out of 100. And Lauren Holly responds, more like 1 out of 1,000,000. And so Jim Carrey thinks about it and says, so you're saying there's a chance. And that's funny because he's dumb and he doesn't understand the difference between 1 out of 100 and 1 out of 1,000,000. And the thing that kills me is that, like, faking it means blindly ignoring these odds. Most founders, if you say to them, what are the chances of your startup succeeding? They have no idea. That's the crucial outcome from this nascent methodology, from trying to decide quickly and cheaply, is this the right opportunity for me right now? Like, by the end of the nascent stage, we want to get you to the point where you think you're able to articulate with data that you think that it's a 1 out of 100 opportunity or a 1 out of 1,000,000 distraction. And that means that as a founder, we can empower you to identify and avoid distractions so that you can focus on opportunities. So I have this like crystal ball with a cash register inside meme, but that I think is really what the most important thing is at the nascent stage. Can you start to get a sense of how much money your startup could make when you have no customers? Historically, the answer was no. I think we can do it better than that. And that's what we want to do coming soon with Nascent. That was what we tried to do, or what we did, I should say, USC last October. We're going to do a better job going forward. And so, yeah, like the outcome is going to be this figuring out, what are the odds? And just to tie bows around some of those open questions that I started with. So founder says, got an idea for a business. Now what? Why has that been a challenge? Because up until now, founders had to fake it till they made it, had to fake it to secure investment. And that caused a lot of confusion. There's also this wing flapping that also causes confusion. And what's changed is that the barrier to entry to get into the startup game, that cost of the entry ticket has dropped from $100,000 to just $100. It's a 1,000x drop, which means that investors have gone from the most important thing for a founder to their biggest distraction. And so this whole talk was all about simplifying entrepreneurship. If you look up conventional answers to this core question, got an idea for business, now what? Just throw it all away. We're going to simplify, and we're going to replace it with this new structure: disideate, search for people in pain, quantify the pain in dollars, evaluate the results, and iterate. My next video is going to be all about that. I just wanted to start by not overburdening founders and giving them more to do. I want to start by giving them less to do so that we could create some space for this useful work. So a huge shout out and thanks again to Paul Orlando at USC. I really appreciate, Paul, your reaching out to me and asking for more content for your students. I hope this really helps them and anybody else who's subscribed to the Nascent podcast and newsletter. And so, yeah, this is the end of Simplifying Entrepreneurship. Coming soon will be the art and science of quantifying pain. Thanks so much. Again, this was Mike Vladimir from nacentstartups.com.